Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Coach Elko, the Texas A&M Aggies, landing another fascinating commitment out of the transfer portal late Monday morning. Former Georgia edge rusher Samuel M'Pemba committing to Texas A&M. Now, the Texas A&M fans, we've talked a lot about this program in the transfer portal, and normally my stance is I'm not going to let you live off your recruiting ranking forever. If you're going into year 3 or year 4 and you were formerly a top 100 prospect, highly coveted dude coming out of high school, it doesn't normally excite me when they're going into year 4 and they haven't really produced. Samuel M'Pemba, only going into year 3, he's kind of an outlier to that stance that I have. And why he's an outlier is you look at this kid coming out of high school, we knew that he was going to be a little bit of a project. He wasn't a top 100 recruit because he was great at football as a senior coming out of high school. He was a top 100 recruit because he's a freaky athlete that is still trying to figure out what position he was going to play. His junior year was used more as a pass catcher, kind of a split out wide jumbo tight end. He goes down to IMG Academy, makes that transition to coming off the edge his senior year, but you kind of knew that he was going to be a guy that needed a little bit more polish to his game as a football player when he got to the next level. And so I'm sitting here not panicked or not surprised that Sam M'Pemba hasn't played a ton for Georgia during the first 2 years, because you kind of knew he was going to be a guy that would take a few years before he's ready to play. And if you're Mike Elko in Texas A&M, you're getting a kid with some freaky traits that has had 2 years of development in Athens, Georgia. Now he's coming to Texas A&M, and you're hoping year 3 he can kind of be that proven contributor for Texas A&M, and he might start as a depth piece for Texas A&M on the defensive line, which is exactly what Texas A&M needed, but gives you that potential over the 2025 season going into 2026. He has 3 years of eligibility remaining to morph into a real difference maker in the SEC coming off the edge. You take one look at this kid, he is muscled up, not a lot of body fat on him, really good athlete, strong hands. Now we just got to make him a good football player. And I'm really excited to see if Texas A&M can do that with him over the next couple of years. I guess the moral of the story here is I'm not panicking that he hasn't played a lot during his first 2 years, because you knew he was an outlier. You knew it would take a little bit for him to become an SEC football player along the lines of scrimmage. I'm very comfortable with Texas A&M taking this one, especially because all we've talked about the last couple of weeks was love what Texas A&M is doing. They've completely changed the pass catcher room around a guy like Marcel Reed. That was, at least in my opinion, priority number one. We kind of said that the depth on the defensive line was a little bit of a question. You're starting to melt away that question with the commitment of guys like Deion Hayes and Samuel M'Pemba. Excited to get into a little bit more of what he can provide to Texas A&M. Talk a little bit about what this rotation on the defensive line, specifically on the edge, is going to look like. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's been a blast breaking down these commitments. A lot of y'all have been rocking with the boys since 12 months ago as we were breaking down the commitments last year. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, getting into Sam M'Pemba. 6'3", 250, a lot of muscle on that frame. He has some power in his hands, a lot of juice off the line of scrimmage as well, considering he was a pass catcher for most of his career as a football player in high school. You're overall looking at a really good athlete, size, speed. Now we got to make him a good football player. But more importantly, this is just a much needed depth piece in the edge rusher category. I mean, you look at losing guys like Nick Gordon and losing guys like Shamar Stewart. I would even argue at times depth was a concern for Texas A&M, even in 2024, where you had the star talent. I mean, Nick Gordon, going to be a first-round NFL draft pick. Shamar Stewart, going to be a high draft pick in his own right. But it felt like they were playing a lot of snaps. And it felt like at times in the back half of the 2024 season and fourth quarters of football games, you could maybe tell that those guys weren't as fresh because they were playing a lot of snaps. I think Mike Elko is trying to improve that depth, and it's never flashy to talk about. It's really important. You look at some of the best defenses we've seen in college football, specifically defensive lines, Georgia, the last couple of years, Michigan in 2023. what made those units so special is not only did they have really good football players, which I know Texas A&M has, but they were really deep and they could rotate those good football players and have them playing their best football in the fourth quarter late in the season as well. I think that's what Mike Elko is trying to get. And now you look at the edge position, and you kind of have a nice blend of different kind of guys. You have some jack linebackers, Cassius Howell, Rylan Kennedy, guys that are going to challenge tackles off that outside shoulder. That burst and length that they bring to the table is going to give a lot of tackles some problems, and they might not be the best run defenders. Well, you're bringing a guy like Deion Hayes. You're bringing a guy like Samuel M'Pemba who goes 6'3", 255, and say you're starting to get some nice balance of edge defenders that can give you a little bit of everything. But I think most importantly, depth. And that's not even including the conversation of a guy like Solomon Williams or a guy like Dalen Evans, whether he plays inside or out on the edge. Those guys, can bring you some depth too going into year two. This is a big pickup. And I don't know if Sam M'Pemba is going to start. He gives you that starting capability. Like, this kid physically is very capable of being the game wrecker in the SEC, but at least you're getting a quality depth addition to that defensive line, which is very important. And if you were to kind of take an overall grade to Texas A&M in the transfer portal, to me it'd be pretty dang high, because it's not necessarily bringing in 30 plus guys like Texas A&M did when Mike Elko took over, but it's a lot more targeted. You look at priority number one for Texas A&M coming into the portal: get better at the pass catcher position. We did not have enough difference makers at pass catcher. Bring in Mario Craver, proving commodity that's only going into year two in the SEC. You're bringing Micah Hudson, who is a former five-star coming out in 2024, a guy that we know can play, to go along with, Terry Bussey going into year two, five-star freshman Jerome Miles coming in. All of a sudden, you're looking at the pass catch room around Marcel Reed and saying, feel pretty dang good about where the pass catcher room can be and what it might be in 2025. And then you look at the defensive line. Oh, Shamar Stewart decides to go to the draft. Nick Gordon decides to go to the draft. We got to get some depth, specifically in the edge rusher department. Bring in Sam M'Pemba, bring in Deion Hayes. Two guys, Deion Hayes, I think, can be a really good football player. And Sam M'Pemba, I think, certainly can be too, but is going to provide really, really quality depth for Texas A&M. Good players at positions you needed. That's how you want to use the transfer portal. You don't want to overturn your roster every single year. You want to use the transfer portal to fill in the cracks and potential question marks of your roster. That seems to be what Texas A&M is doing. And we'll see how they finish out the transfer portal cycle. We'll continue to break down the commitments as they come in. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.